Most bait works until you're dealing with the kind of fish that don't make mistakes. The big ones. The cautious ones. The fish that have seen every bait, every trick, and learned to ignore almost all of it. So instead of trying something stronger, I tried something simpler. I took a can of corn, added a little honey, poured in some cheap beer, and left it for a couple of days. It didn't look impressive. It didn't smell powerful in the way most baits do. But when I put it in the water, the reaction was different. Not faster, but more confident. The kind of slow, deliberate bite you only get from fish that usually don't commit. And that's when it clicked. This wasn't just bait. It was something that felt natural enough to lower their guard. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how this works, why it's so effective on pressured fish, and how you can use it to target the ones that most people never catch. When you're targeting big, cautious fish, the biggest mistake most anglers make is trying to overpower them with stronger bait. More scent, more additives, more intensity. But that approach often does the opposite of what you want. Fish that have survived long enough to grow big are not aggressive by accident. They are selective. Over time, they learn to recognize patterns, especially repeated ones. Strong artificial smells, overly processed bait, or anything that feels slightly unnatural can trigger hesitation instead of a bite. So instead of making the bait stronger, the goal here is to make it more believable. That's where this combination starts to make sense. Corn is already a familiar food source, especially for species like carp and catfish. It's something they've encountered many times without danger. Honey adds a natural sweetness that signals energy, but more importantly, it creates a softer scent profile that doesn't feel aggressive. And then there's the beer. This is where things change. As it sits, it begins to ferment, breaking down the mixture and releasing subtle acids and organic compounds into the water. That fermentation process creates a signal that fish associate with natural food breaking down, something easy to eat and safe to approach. So instead of forcing a reaction, this bait creates a sequence. Attraction, curiosity, and then confidence. And for cautious fish, that final step is everything. The way you prepare this bait matters just as much as the ingredients themselves, because the goal isn't just to mix them together, it's to trigger the right level of breakdown over time. Start with a can of sweet corn. You don't need anything expensive, just regular canned corn works perfectly. Drain a small portion of the liquid, but don't remove all of it, because that natural corn water already contains sugars that help the process. Next, add honey. Not too much, just enough to lightly coat the corn. The purpose here isn't to make it overly sweet, but to create a sticky layer that holds scent and feeds the fermentation. Then pour in a small amount of beer. You don't need anything special. Even the cheapest option works, because what you're really adding is yeast and fermentable compounds. Mix everything gently, then seal it in a container and let it sit. This is where patience becomes important. After about 24 hours, you'll start to notice a change in smell. After 48 hours, it becomes stronger, slightly sour, but still natural. That's the sweet spot. At this stage, the corn is no longer just corn. It has absorbed the mixture, softened slightly, and started releasing scent in a more complex way. And that complexity is exactly what makes cautious fish drop their guard instead of turning away. To understand why this bait works so well, especially on larger and more cautious fish, you have to look at how they behave differently from smaller, more aggressive ones. Big fish don't rush in. They observe first. They approach slowly, often staying just outside the main feeding zone while they evaluate what's happening. Every signal in the water matters, especially scent. Species like carp and catfish rely heavily on chemical detection, and over time, they become extremely good at recognizing what feels natural and what doesn't. When they detect something unfamiliar or too strong, they don't attack. They test. A quick touch, a light pickup, and then they drop it immediately. That's why you get those small taps but no solid hook. This fermented corn bait changes that interaction completely. Instead of a sharp, artificial scent, it releases a softer, layered signal. The sweetness from the honey suggests energy, while the fermentation from the beer creates a slightly sour, organic profile that mimics natural food breaking down in the water. To a cautious fish, that combination doesn't feel risky. It feels familiar. And that's the key difference. Because once a fish feels confident, it doesn't just test the bait. It takes it in, holds it longer, and gives you the moment you need to set the hook. To really see if this bait made a difference, I didn't just look at how many bites I got. I focused on how the fish reacted, especially the bigger ones that usually stay out of reach. I chose a spot where fish are known to be pressured, a place where they've seen a lot of bait and don't make easy mistakes. I started with a standard setup, something reliable, something that should at least produce consistent action. And it did, but only to a point. There were small taps, quick movements, signs that fish were nearby, but very few of those interactions turned into solid takes. The kind of behavior you expect when fish are interested but not convinced. Then I switched to the fermented corn. The change wasn't immediate in terms of numbers, but it was obvious in behavior. The bites slowed down, became more deliberate. Instead of sharp taps, I felt steady pressure, like the fish was actually holding onto the bait instead of testing it. That difference matters more than most people think. Because when a fish holds the bait longer, everything changes. Your timing improves, your hook sets become cleaner, and those cautious fish that normally slip away suddenly become catchable. And that's exactly what happened. Fewer random hits, but far more committed takes, especially from the kind of fish that usually don't give you a second chance. By the end of this, the result was clear, but more importantly, the reason behind it made even more sense. This bait doesn't work because it's stronger. It works because it removes the reason for fish to hesitate. Most bait is designed to force a reaction. Strong smells, aggressive attractants, something that grabs attention quickly. But with cautious fish, attention isn't the problem. Trust is. And that's where this simple combination changes everything. The corn provides familiarity. The honey adds a soft, natural sweetness. And the fermentation from the beer creates a scent profile that feels like real food breaking down in the water. Not fresh, not artificial, but something in between. That subtle difference is what lowers their guard. Instead of triggering curiosity followed by rejection, it creates curiosity followed by confidence. And once that confidence is there, the bite becomes something completely different. Slower, more deliberate, and far more committed. That's why this works so well on bigger fish, the ones that don't make mistakes. Because you're not trying to trick them. You're giving them a reason to believe the bait is safe. And when that happens, you don't just get more bites. You get the bites that actually matter.